this opportunity to thank our colleague, Mr. Benjamin, who has taken us through the transmission of impulses. And I thank him because he has given me a basis to use his knowledge to apply it in our daily life. I'm going to use it to discuss with you the reflex actions. My name is Mukisa Travor, and I'm taking you through the reflex actions. I'm going to start with a simple fact which says that the fastest supercomputer in the world uses 24 million watts to run, but our brain uses 20 watts to operate over 100,000 times faster. This makes it the fastest device in the universe. Wow, I think it's amazing. Another thing which I want to ask you, are you aware that there are different things which occur within our lives, especially our bodies, without our control? You think critically about them and ask yourself how they are being brought about. I wanna give you a simple picture. If you look at the blinking of the eyes, our eyes will keep on blinking. That action, it occurs without our control. Nevertheless, we can't do anything about it. We can't prevent it from occurring, but it keeps on happening. Another instance, this is whereby you suddenly remove your hand when you touch a hot object. This happens in our daily life when the person unexpectedly removes their hand from a hot object after touching it. So, my dear colleagues, I thereby introduce to you the reflex actions. Scientifically, a reflex action is a rapid automatic response an organism gives to a stimulus without the initiation of the brain. As it has been said by my colleague Benjamin, he has given us a brief introduction about the definition of the stimulus, whereby I think right now you are well versed about it. A stimulus is just a sudden change within the environment to which an organism responds to. Then, another term which I want to talk about is the response. The response is just an action an organism takes in case of a stimulus. In our daily life, these reflex actions that have been occurring and they have been occurring in our lives, and these reflex actions have different characteristics. For example, as you all see, they are inborn within us, they are rapid or spontaneous, and these reflex actions they occur without our willingness or our control. I wanna also inform you that these reflex actions they occur without our control, without the initiation of the brain, but immediately after the reflex action occurring like this, the impulse will be sent to the brain to inform you that the action has taken place. These reflex actions are of great importance in our lives. For example, they help us to escape from danger. For instance, when a person touches a hot object and unexpectedly removes their hand from it, this is a good example to show that they really help us to escape danger. They also help in regulation of the body processes, for example, homeostasis. The reflex actions also form a basis of some animals' behavior, such as amoeba. Having talked about the importance of the reflex actions, allow me to go to the classification of the reflex actions. These reflex actions they are broadly classified into two categories. That is to say, the simple reflex actions and the conditioned reflex actions. As we go in front there, my colleague is going to talk about the conditioned reflex actions. That's ready. But for me here, I'm going to talk about mainly the simple reflex actions. The simple reflex actions, they are also subdivided into two. That is to say, the cranial reflex actions and then the spinal reflex actions. The cranial reflex actions, firstly, these ones for them, they are mediated through their pathways in the brain and the cranial nerves. Examples of these include the blinking of the eyes. The blinking of the eyes is a cranial reflex action which is brought about a stimulus of when something comes near the eyes. The eyelids are going to close, bring about that reflex action. The other cranial reflex action, we have the pupil reflex. The pupil reflex, simply this one is a changing in the size of the pupil, the dilation and the constriction. The stimulus which brings about this is light intensity. Changes in light intensity, they bring about the change in the size of the pupil reflex. Another cranial reflex is sneezing. Sneezing is also a cranial reflex which is brought about a stimulus of the irritation of the nasal membrane. The other lastly is swallowing. Swallowing is also a cranial reflex. When something, you are eating food and then the food reaches the epiglottis, it's going to make the glottis open the epiglottis such that the food enters the stomach. Allow me also to talk about the spinal reflexes. The spinal reflexes, for them, they are the reflex actions which are mediated through their pathways in the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. An example of these include the withdrawal reflex. The withdrawal reflex, this happens when a person unexpectedly removes their hand after touching a hot object, or when a person unexpectedly removes a hand or a leg when a thorn pricks him or her. The other example of a spinal reflex action is the knee jerk. The knee jerk, this is observed when a person crosses over his right hand over the left hand. When a person, so allow me also talk about the spinal reflex actions. The spinal reflex actions, these ones for them, they're the reflex actions which are mediated through their pathways in the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. An example of this is the withdrawal reflex. The withdrawal reflex is observed when a person unexpectedly removes his hand after touching a hot object, or when a person unexpectedly removes their hand when is being pricked by a thorn or a sharp object. The other example of the reflex of the spinal reflex is the knee jerk. The knee jerk is observed when a person crosses over his right leg over the left leg and stacks hardly below the kneecap. It will be observed that the right leg will jerk outwards. Lastly, I want to talk about the reflex arc. Basing on the knowledge of my colleague Benjamin, I'm going to use it to take you through the reflex arc. The reflex arc, this is a path which is taken by an impulse to bring about a reflex action. There are 3 different neurons which are involved in bringing about a reflex arc, as they were described by my colleague Benjamin. We have the sensory neuron, the intermediate neuron or the relay neuron, have the motor neurons. The sensor neurons, these ones for them, they are going to carry the impulse from the receptors to the spinal cord, and then within the spinal cord, in the gray matter, we have the intermediate neuron, which is going to transmit the impulse to the motor neuron. Then the motor neuron will transmit the impulse to the effector muscles to bring about the reflex action. Within this, I'm going to talk about an example when a person unexpectedly removes the hand after touching a hot object, or when a person unexpectedly removes the hand after being pricked by a thorn or a sharp object. And this is a withdrawal reflex. So my dear colleagues, allow me to describe the withdrawal reflex to you. The withdrawal reflex is the way it happens. First, when a person is being pricked by a thorn, the pain receptors in the skin, which are the free nerve endings, they are going to receive the stimulus of pain, and they are going to be stimulated to generate an impulse from the stimulus. After generating the impulse, the sensor neuron is going to transmit this impulse to the spinal cord. This sensor neuron is going to transmit the impulse to the spinal cord, and again the impulse will enter the spinal cord through the dorsal root, which is a branch of the spinal cord. After entering the spinal cord through the dorsal root, it's going to enter the cell body of the different sensory neurons in the dorsal root ganglion. A ganglion is just a mass of the many cell bodies of sensory neurons with one outer coating. So after the impulse entering the cell bodies of the different sensory neurons in the dorsal root ganglion, it's going to move through the axon to the gray matter of the spinal cord. The gray matter of the spinal cord this is the H-shaped structure at the center of the spinal cord. The gray matter contains the intermediate neuron. The intermediate neuron transmits the impulse to the motor neuron from the sensory neuron. So when the impulse travels, the impulse moves across the axon and reaches the impulse moves across the axon and reaches the dendrites of the sensory neuron. It's going to be transmitted across the synapse to the intermediate neuron. So when the intermediate neuron receives the impulse is going to move across its axon and it's going to reach at the other end of the dendrites. When it reaches the end of the dendrites, it's going to also be transmitted across the synapse to the dendrites of the motor neuron. When the motor neuron receives the impulse is going to travel along the axon of the motor neuron, and it's going to move away from the spinal cord through the ventral root across the motor neuron. The motor neuron has the terminal endlets, which are going to end in the effector muscles of the arm, that is to say, the biceps and the triceps. The impulse is going to make the biceps to contract and the triceps to relax. As a result, a person is going to suddenly remove their hand from the hot object or from a sharp object, and this is going to bring about the reflex action, which is the withdrawal of reflex. So in summary, These reflex actions, they are brought about by a reflex arc, which also being brought about by the transmission of impulses involving the free neurons, the sensor neuron, the intermediate neuron, and the motor neuron. Thank you for listening.